So, this crisis, that's the European crisis that's unfolding at the moment, has thrown up lots and lots of bits of jargon. And lots of those bits of jargon you need to worry about, and I've dealt with in other videos. But here's one that you don't. But I'm going to explain what it is anyway, because it's creating a lot of fuss in the newspapers right now. It's called Target 2. It's an acronym that's flying around, creating a lot of debate, and people wondering, should we worry or shouldn't we? And my answer to that question is going to be, not yet. Not right now. So what is Target? Okay, well, it's an acronym. It's a fairly horrible acronym, and it describes a system that's at the heart of the European project. It's a system, to give it its full title, wait for this, called the Trans-European Automated Real-Time Gross Express Transfer System version 2. Now, if you didn't get any of that, don't worry, you don't need to have done. It's a largely hidden system, and it's only normally day-to-day of interest to central banks and the European Central Bank. Why? Because it performs a vital function. Remember, Europe is one huge currency zone, and that means, just like the UK is a currency zone and America is a currency zone, that means that people have to have faith in the ability of euros to flow around the system freely, to finance trade and so on. You know, 100 euros has got to look the same in a French bank account as it does in a German bank account. It's got to be worth the same, and people have got to have confidence that they can transfer money in and out of those accounts easily when they want to and on time. Enter the Target 2 system. This is a central bank system, and essentially what it enables central banks to do is facilitate payment between themselves, reflecting activity that's going on between the commercial banks that operate day to day within Europe. So this system is a crucial mechanism in facilitating free trade around the Eurozone. So what we're going to do in this video is take a quick look at how it works. I'm going to shortcut that because there are 5, 6, 7, 8 page papers on the internet all about how it works, but for this purpose I'm going to shorten that down to a very simple example. I'm going to ask the question, why are people worrying about Target 2? Why is a system that's day-to-day obscure to most people actually making the headlines right now? And it's all to do with the Germans, okay? And I'm going to argue that for the time being, it's a bit of a red herring. We don't actually need to worry about Target 2 as much as some people think, provided the Eurozone stays together, all right? If it doesn't, then all bets are off. But in fairness, if the Eurozone collapses, people will have more than just an obscure acronym to worry about. Okay, so what is the Target system in a nutshell? Well, let's take a very straightforward example. Right? Let's say I am an Irish farmer who wants to pay for a piece of machinery. So there's my Irish farmer. And I want to pay for a piece of machinery. Graphics are superb as ever. I've just bought from a German manufacturer. Okay, excuse my writing, but Irish farmer, German manufacturer. Essentially, chances are they're not going to do it by cash. All right, I've just bought the machinery. I could go to my bank as the Irish farmer, fill up a suitcase full of euros, take them over to Germany, all right, and hand them over and say, voila. Well, not to a German, obviously, but you get the idea. All right, chances are I'm not going to do that because not many transactions happen by cash these days. All right, my check from my employer doesn't arrive okay at the end of the month in cash. It goes into my bank, and I trust that it arrives on the day that it's supposed to be paid in. All right, so these days transactions tend not to happen by cash, but they could, and that's worth remembering when I make a point at the end about whether this system Target 2 is creating any real headaches or not. So let's assume I don't do that. Let's assume that the Irish farmer has an account with Anglo-Irish Bank. This is Anglo-Irish, and the German manufacturer has an account, doesn't really matter which bank I pick, with Commerzbank. Okay, what's got to happen is money electronically has got to be taken from there to there, but the way it happens, this is where the Target 2 system comes in, is via the central banks of the respective members of the Eurozone, and then the whole balance that's created between central banks is tallied by Target 2 at the European Central Bank. What do I mean by that? Well, let's introduce the Irish central bank. All right, and the German central bank, Venice, that's called the Bundesbank. All right, and over here you've got the Central Bank of Ireland, but the Irish central bank, the German central bank, each Eurozone member has a central bank. Okay, all that effectively happens electronically in order to facilitate a transfer from this account from this account to that account. Okay, is you create an obligation for Anglo-Irish to pay the central bank in Ireland. That creates a corresponding claim from the Bundesbank to meet an obligation to Commerzbank, which will then result in the German manufacturer being paid. So sitting here, you've got the ECB, the European Central Bank, just keeping a tally on what are called the reserve transfer balances between these central banks. All right, in other words, if you wanted to follow it through without using debits and credits, which frankly I'll avoid in this video, you would say, well, there's an account here at Anglo-Irish which has money belonging to the farmer in it. That is reduced. All right, that creates an obligation to pay the Irish Central Bank, which creates an obligation to the ECB, which is then going to reverse the process to make sure the money ends up over here. So you end up with a claim from the German Central Bank against the ECB, matched by a claim from Commerzbank to the German Central Bank, the Bundesbank, so that this account is credited. So in other words, it's a bit of a long-winded process, but target 2 is the system that keeps the score, if you like, cumulatively between each of these central banks. So what the target 2 system basically does is keep a running check. If there are transfers of euros happening for any number of reasons, there are savers paying money into their bank accounts, there are Irish farmers trying to pay for machinery from German manufacturers, okay, there are interbank transfers as well. This system, target 2, keeps a running check on who owes what to whom in central bank terms. Now, why would anyone care about a system that just facilitates the flow of electronic euros around the Eurozone? Again, I mean, so what in one sense? And by the way, why is the ECB involved at all? Well, ultimately, the European Central Bank is the central bank's bank, if you like, and they have overall responsibility for making sure that euros flow around the system to the place they're required at the time they're required and to the account they're required to land in. All right, so target 2 keeps the running score. Now, what's happening is basically this. The reason people are starting to sort of get nervous, or some people are getting nervous, is that the Germans are building up huge claims against the ECB within the target 2 system. Translation, an awful lot of money is electronically flowing to Germany. All right, it results in big claims by the German Central Bank, the Bundesbank, against the ECB, recorded in target 2. Size, well, it's a running total, it varies, but we could put a number at the moment around 800 billion euros on the size of that claim. And on the other side, in some of the peripheral countries, Ireland, Portugal, Spain and so on, you've got liabilities clocking up, okay, of a similar cumulative amount. In other words, obligations from the central banks of those weaker peripheral state countries to the ECB. So you've got German banks building up a big claim on the ECB, okay, reflecting the fact that 3 things are happening right now. 1, Germans sell a lot of kit to other people around the Eurozone, they export a lot, all right, so they end up with big claims for the euros that are supposed to be paid by the people buying the kit to German banks. Secondly, customers around the Eurozone are starting to get nervous, so they're moving their money out of peripheral banks into German banks. That boosts the size of this claim against the ECB. All right, and thirdly, you've got the fact that German banks are tending not to roll over loans to weaker peripheral banks, they're tending to kind of hoard the money, if you like. And all 3 things can boost the size of the German Central Bank, the Bundesbank's claim against the ECB. Now, does it matter? Because people sort of say, well, doesn't that mean in effect the weaker Eurozone states through this central bank target 2 system owe lots of money to Germany. All right? Well, you can see it that way, but actually it doesn't matter. All right? Because at the end of the day, these electronic euros have got to sit somewhere within the Eurozone. And the fact a lot of them are in a claim by the Bundesbank against the ECB doesn't matter unless you think the whole Eurozone currency system is about to collapse. All right? Because at the end of the day, these euros could be sitting anywhere within the Eurozone. It's a bit like, if you like, if I watch my wife spending money on shoes, clothes, fancy food and so on, do I start to panic and start to worry? No, because as a married couple, we're one kind of currency team, if you like. I will carry on funding her until we get divorced. In the same way, okay, within the Eurozone, what's going to happen to this big balance? Well, the answer is nothing really. Why? Because here's the key thing. Now, here are some things that sort of people are worrying about, but they really, in a way, shouldn't. First off, okay, what would happen to the Germans who are, if you like, owed this 800 billion, you can see it that way, within the Target 2 system? What would happen to the Germans if, say, someone actually defaulted? All right? So Greece pulls out of the Eurozone, owing within Target 2 100 billion euros. All right? Effect on the Germans. What does that mean? Massive losses to Germany? No, because the ECB will allocate the loss, number one, and under the current agreement, the Germans just take 27% of it. Other countries take their share of Greek pain, okay? So it wouldn't result in a hit to Germany, okay, through the Target 2 system of the size that some people imagine. And secondly, these payables are collateralized. Now, what I mean by that is, if Anglo-Irish chooses to meet its obligation to make that payment on behalf of the farmer to the German manufacturer by drawing down central bank reserves in the way I've described, and there are one or two other ways they could do it in practice, they are required to post collateral with the Irish Central Bank in order to do so. So what I'm saying is that if you want to see this side of the equation as a loan in the Eurozone, it doesn't really matter because it's collateralized. So go back to my example, all right, where Greece defaults entirely on its obligation through Target 2. Well, there are assets backing that 100 billion euros that I mentioned, okay? So let's assume that those assets are only good for 50% of the balance, so you'd have to write off 50%. That would leave a 50 billion loss, of which the Germans take 27%. That's only around 13.5 billion euros. All right? So the size of some of the losses that people are banding around are unrealistic, because at the end of the day, the Germans would only take a hit for their share of any problem caused by a country like Greece. And in any case, if Greece were to default, let's say, and leave the Eurozone, that would leave the Greek central bank free to print its own currency, the drachma, and presumably at some sort of pre-agreed exchange rate, the Greeks would then settle their obligation to the ECB. All right? So, Target 2 then is a system that's important for interbank transfer purposes. It operates between central banks to keep a running tab at the ECB, if you like, of who owes what to whom, but only in the sense that an awful lot of the electronic euros in the system have flown towards Germany, reflecting, number one, the fact that Germans export a lot, okay, so they have a current account surplus, which is mirrored to an extent by Target 2. Customers are moving money into Germany. That is worrying, okay, insofar as it indicates a kind of flight to safety, all right? And thirdly, we've got the idea that German banks are not as willing to loan money to other banks within the Eurozone as they used to be. So, possible issues. Personally, I don't see any reason to panic about the size of the amount owed to Germany through Target 2, but cause for concern would be, number one, how much collateral can, for example, Irish banks keep posting at the central bank in return for funding? Now, there's supposed to be plenty of collateral available of an appropriate standard around the Eurozone. There are trillions of euros worth of deposits around the Eurozone, but the question has to be asked, at what point do you run out of collateral to back some of those central bank loans? Again, that's a rather separate issue, but it is an issue. And of course, if the Eurozone were to break up, all right, then you'd have a whole new set of problems on your hands, much bigger than the ones I'm suggesting within the Target 2 system. But provided the Eurozone stays together, okay, and that's a big but, at the moment, I don't see any reason to panic in the way that some commentators appear to want you to, about target 2 imbalances.